presentation up. Are you guys ready?
One of our group members isn't here, but oh, okay.
There you go.
Ready?
All right. Go ahead.
Today we're going to be talking about problems of online marketing. Preserving customers' privacy. Privacy can be a huge issue in online marketing. For one thing, customers want to be assured that their personal information will not be leaked onto the web in any way. For example, if a company is advertising an app that a customer must log into and give their email address and possibly their phone number, the customer wants assurance that their information will not be given to any other websites and will not be abused in any way, shape, or form. It's up to the company to decide what their boundaries are and when abusing the customer's information, but where's that fine line? So where do companies draw the line? Everyone views privacy differently. To give their customers peace of mind and make themselves look more credible, they need to make it clear what they're going to do with the information, how they're going to use it, if they're going to store it or not, and how they're going to track the usage of their products. Customers need to feel as though their privacy is protected and will respect a company more if they do so. There is no perfect formula for where to draw the line, which is why it's important for companies to make their intentions clear. Privacy can be defined as variously as technical data protection measures, individual control over personal data, appropriate data usage in situated contexts, or categories of harm to individuals and groups from the Journal of Business Ethics. The problem is not all producers want to make consumers' privacy unreachable. They may find it beneficial to use in further developing their products. So again, the question arises, where is the line drawn and how far is too far?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you should pull the screen down so that we can. I apologize for not doing that.
All right, so obviously marketing is important to any business. On average, a company spends 46% of their budget on digital marketing, so online. Some of the problems with that is, according to the ingroup.com, most people spend 10 to 20 seconds on the website after clicking on it. So with that, there's a lot of psychology that goes into online marketing. The layout of your website is very important, from certain colors to attract and keep the customer's attention, to I guess kind of like product placement where you place certain links and tabs and things like that. Another problem is understanding your customers, so finding certain words to keep their attention as well, and to make them want to continue to shop on your website. As I said earlier, because most people spend less time on the website, you want your layout to be extremely simple. If people are having to search and try to figure out where certain things are at, that's going to drive them away even more quickly.
So with marketing, there's also various platforms they have to know what to do. So we went upon, social media marketing like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or many companies fall short is reaching customers on social media and they don't know how to manage it. There's certain key points that companies should look at when it comes to building their name on social media, like finding the good platform, like how I mentioned Twitter is a very good one, just because almost all of the youth would have one, or most of your target audience would have some of the newer social medias. Be engaging with your audience, followers, simply just liking or retweet, but also being able to timely respond to questions that customers or any patrons may have is important so that you not only satisfy current customers, but hopefully potential customers. Um, Usually you want to do that within 3 to 4 hours of someone posting a question, just so you're not keeping them waiting. Any successful manager within their page should curate interesting content, though it can take some thought to come up with interesting content that is relevant to your brand. If you add your personality to each post, you'll be adding something fresh and original and not just come with content you can find on the internet like, I don't know, cat memes all the time. Now that we have some of the general details out of the way, more specifics, you must help your team understand your target audience. For instance, if your target audience is like teens or college students like us, you wouldn't want to make a post or make an ad at 5 in the morning because no one would be able to see it and it would be lost in the thread. Perhaps keeping in mind certain time zones should aid, and having a set schedule on perhaps when to post. We want to keep things fresh. If we keep posting the same thing all day, it will lose its humor or dry out its power behind it, because people will see the same thing over and over again. It's nothing fresh. It's going to be boring, and no one wants to see something boring. You may think it is easy, but a lot of distractions may come in your way in the forms of links to other blogs and posts. So it is said that for every 50 minutes of work, take a 10-minute break, just so ideas are curating in your mind, yet everything is still fresh. Finally, none of this is possible without the ability to manage time. If you give yourself enough time to come up with the best content, you will find yourself in a rush to post something for your followers that may be found dull and boring.
A few years back, the biggest problem marketers faced was how to reach their consumers and when to reach them. But with the presence of social media and all that, it's pretty easy now because there are different devices that people use. It's either, if you're at work, you're either using a computer. If you're laying on your couch, you might be using an iPad or your phone or a laptop even. So that made marketing really easy for present day marketers because right now people don't have to walk from door to door like they used to do in the old days to search for clients to buy their products. But now a marketer could present 100 products to you while you're just sitting down on your couch. And for consumers, we don't have to walk from door to door in search of better pricing or better quality. But nowadays, everything is laid side by side, on the website. So one of the problems that most marketers face with this issue is with this the presence of present day marketing, it has made products so competitive that you have products that were inelastic before are inelastic now, priced inelastic, and those that were priced inelastic before are almost perfectly elastic. So, and another problem that they get to face with multiple device usage is you have customers looking at your products at different times. You could have somebody who was at work 2 hours ago, and while they were going through a website, they found your product and they did a little research on it. But after work, they went home. They're not working on that computer no more. Now they're working on an iPad. And they look up your product. Maybe you have a Facebook page, they look it up on there, but they're not convinced about it. And maybe when they're going to bed at night, they decide that that's the product they want, and they go to the cell phone and purchase your product. But the problem with that is now the experts don't know if it is 3 different inquiries that has been made on your product, or it is the same product that that was searched by the same person. And even if now that it's the same person, they have a problem because you don't know, they can't conclude that it was the same inquiry that became a sale. So on books, it still looks like you had a sale, and on the other side, you have 2 other inquiries. So it creates a problem. And one other problem that this brings is when problems of when problems like that come up, you don't know for a company they don't know if they should focus their resources on maybe the youth that have that use only their cell phones. Because if let me say if you have 3 million users that use their cell phones to search your product, you're looking at that as 3 million inquiries. But for an older person who works, comes back home, sits on the porch, goes out, they could have used a computer, a phone, an iPad, a laptop to look at your product, and that could be misleading because you could be focusing your resources on the wrong set of marketing resources. Thank you.
Overall, online marketing is a very useful tool and can be very beneficial to companies. If they're able to dodge or work through these problems, then their online marketing system should have a better chance to succeed. And here are our resources. Thank you.
Do you guys have any? I have questions. Don't. Do you all have any questions? No. Okay. So, to begin with, one of the points that you made out was about optimizing the mobile experience, and you said most people spend only a few seconds on a mobile website. Why do you think that's true?
From what I read, it's because they're competing. Your website essentially is competing with Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. So they may quickly go onto your website, and then let's say somebody likes your picture on Instagram. They're going to immediately go to Instagram, and they're going to start showing. Because psychology has shown that it's kind of sad, but social media, whenever we get certain likes and stuff, dopamine goes up in your brain. It
That's right.
can affect whether you're depressed or happy. So if let's say you're searching for a new TV, next thing you know, somebody likes 3 pictures in a row on your Instagram. Your attention goes from shopping for a TV to, at this point now, they go on Instagram, you may stalk that person who likes your pictures, and that's a set of different problems and stuff. So you're just competing with other, outlets as well.
Okay. I think one of the things that leads to a problem with that is how many of you have notifications for various apps turned on your phone? Almost everybody does. You allow notifications because you want to know, and those, so you could be looking at something and all of a sudden you get a notification from, as you said, Instagram or Facebook or something like that says somebody's liked something, or you've got a friend that's got a birthday, and all of a sudden you're off on a rabbit trail, down, totally ignoring what it was you were doing before and on to the next thing. So I think that's important in recognizing that, and how you have very limited amount of time. Time compression has become a much bigger issue with regard to marketing in a mobile age than it was, when people actually looked at catalogs, for example. Sears and Roebuck at one point in time was the largest retailer. It had this huge tower in Chicago called the Sears Tower, which is no longer, by the way, called the Sears Tower anymore because Sears has gone broke. It's now called something else. Although most people still refer to it as the Sears Tower because it was the Sears Tower for so long. But Sears used to put out this, what they called the wish book every year. And people would sit down and they would go through, they didn't have this phone or this computer that they could turn on and look for stuff. And so they would go through the catalog and actually look at items and products. I remember my family getting the Sears catalog, and it was a big deal before we had all of this. So one of the other points that you all made was finding the best platform. How do you do that? How do you find the best platform? What does it mean to be the best platform?
The best platform refers more to your audience, which I feel is the most important when it comes to marketing off. You got to know your audience. So for instance, if your target audience was college students, you can always find them on Twitter, always scrolling through posts or looking at videos all the time. And that would be the best platform for our age group. It just depends on, for instance, if you go to, let's say, my grandma and grandpa who still read the newspaper, for that audience, you still want to post the newspaper because they won't be on Twitter or Instagram like we are.
Okay, so even within those that are more technologically sophisticated than, say, the traditionalists, why is it that your generation is more interested in Twitter and less interested in Facebook?
I say with our we're always more interested in other people's stories, and we're more apt to. Since Twitter, you can always find threads of stories or interesting videos. You're more apt to be there.
You can't find that on Facebook?
I mean, you can, but like from what I've seen and what I've like looked up, is more people are always on Twitter in comparison to Facebook. Because you're like, hey, do you get on Facebook? And they're like, no, that's for old people. You know?
Facebook is for old people. Okay. Yeah, Gen Xers. That's it. It's old. Yeah, I think but I think there's some truth there. One of the things that I noticed. So I was one of the early adopters of social media. I started teaching here at UCL. I've told you all this multiple times. When I was 22 years old. At that point in time, the average age of our freshmen at UCL was 29. We were a very non-traditional campus. Why was that? Well, we were in the middle of a recession and people were going back to school from the oil fields and learning a new skill. And so there was a convergence of factors. So there was the oil bust that led older people to be going back to school to try and figure out what they were going to do with the second half of their life. When oil was not making any money and they needed to find new jobs. The second was that they passed House Bill 1017, which required a whole bunch of teachers to go back to become qualified in the areas in which they were teaching. Before that bill passed, I think and at the time I was a political science professor. Before that bill passed, in order to teach political science at the high school level, to teach government at the high school level or the junior high level, civics, all you had to have was have American national government in college. That was the requirement. Right? So I always said it was no wonder that students hated that, because it was always taught by a coach who'd rather be coaching than, because there was just almost no requirement. It's really hard to teach calculus if you haven't had more advanced math courses. But the idea was that you didn't need to very much teach political science. And so there were all these teachers that came back. So I was much younger than most of my students at that point in time. As I got older, I noticed that my students found me less relevant. And as they got younger, as we became a much more traditional campus. And so I was one of the early adopters of social media because that was a way that I could connect with my students and stay sort of relevant to them. And to think that you would think that Facebook is for old people, well, I mean, it kind of is. Why is that? Well, it's because your parents got on it. And once your parents start creeping on the Facebook, it's no longer cool, right? So you have moved on to other things. Does that mean that Twitter will always be? I don't know. Donald Trump has figured out this Twitter thing pretty well, and he's pretty old. So I'm not sure that it's always going to be relevant to a younger generation. Twitter may become the old people's platform as something else takes its prominence with young people. Your final point, one of the things that you talked about was price elasticity, and you said that things that were inelastic. So basically, what are things that are inelastic? Well, there's stuff that you need, whether or not you've got the money or can afford them. Really, they're staples of life. But you said that things that were inelastic have all of a sudden become elastic as a result of online marketing. Why is that? Can you give me a specific example?
I'll use you for an example. Let me say, you said you grew up in Guthrie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me say, 25 years back, if the car dealer, you probably had like one car dealer in Guthrie.
We had two, yeah, but you're close.
Okay. So back then, with all the people that lived in there, if they knew you needed a car if you're coming there to buy a car, you put a new one. So the prices, there was no incentive for them to bring down their prices. But somebody living in Guthrie today, even if there's two car dealerships over there, they can get on Car Gurus, Carvana, and look out for something different that has different prices.
Uh-huh.
So this creates competition. And the car dealer now in Guthrie, he's probably on car gurus himself, and he sees relative pricing in, let me say, a 100 or a 200-mile radius. So he's pushed to set his prices at a point that reflects the industry.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good example. One of the ones that I can think of as being really a good example is gas. It used to be that you bought gas as a convenience product, right? You buy it where you can. But now people can search, they can look, they can get on a gas app and find who's got the cheapest gas. And so that has forced people to be more competitive, even in what was a highly competitive market already. And that may increase elasticity in that market, the fact that people can find cheaper gas. All right, good job. We got one other group to go. Who's next? You all were which one? The Formidable Sellers or Breakfast Club?
All right, we are the Formidable Sellers, and today we're going to be discussing the issues with gambling, and we're going to make the connection towards the economy. And we're also going to talk about our theory, which is the risks and effects of gambling can be reduced by guidance and advertising. Mark, would you start us off?
So the authors of this article, Gambling as a Public Health Issue in Wales, have attempted to broaden the perspective of the impact gambling has on the society, more so than just the individual. It has the potential to cause harm to the wider society, and it's an issue that can't be tackled by interventions solely aimed at individuals. And then here's our theory again: the risk in the face of gambling harms can be reduced by proper guidance and advertising. So a few facts on gambling. Last year, they spent 14.4 billion pounds, which is about 19 million US dollars, was lost in gambling in Great Britain. So that either means people were losing more or either people were spending more. So more than half the adults in Great Britain gamble, and 14% of children, 11 to 16-year-olds, gamble, even though the legal age is 18. The estimated cost to a Welsh public service for problem gamblers was around 40 to 70 million pounds. And almost 1 in 5 adults in Great Britain gamble online, which is legal there. So, and advertising in the UK was increased from 152,000 commercials in 2006 to almost 1.4 million in 2012.
All right, so we'll talk about the history of gambling. Casino di Venezia, that was the first casino built in Italy. gambling is the root. Gambling became the root of. It started in Italy. So this was the first gambling house. It was the control system. They needed to supervise all the gambling that happened. The ancient Chinese created the idea of shuffling cards. They created money out of paper, and they just learned how to shuffle it. So that's how we created just shuffling decks of cards. They are also known as assumed to be the first who created the deck of cards with humans on them. And then in poker, that's one of the most popular gambling in America. Persians, they created that. That was known as as. And then gambling was banned during the Prohibition era. That was in the 1910. So gambling, virtual online gambling was banned along with alcohol. And then advertisement. What they use to advertise is attractive people. Usually, attractive people is what gets people involved in entertainment or anything that we're promoting. Making any scenario that doesn't sound as bad. So if you go to the casino, entering in 1 cent, that doesn't sound so bad, but at the end of it, you lost all of your money. You enter in about $50, $60. And advertising commercials and billboards consistently on highways, you're always seeing billboards with casinos. The next exit, there's a casino coming up. Commercials, there's many commercials advertise lottery, the Mega Million. That's been very consistent lately because they want you to put more money into it to win it, even though it's very low chances of you winning that.
So the social responsibility in the gaming industry, they like the gaming companies and regulators need to take an initiative to go past just wanting people to come in and play. They need to care for like their well-being whenever they come in and play. So advertising the risks of playing or acknowledging the risks of playing. So companies just want you to come in and spend money, and they don't really care if you walk out empty-handed or with a pocket full of cash. Taking steps to reduce risks of playing. I'll talk about this in the next slide, but it kind of just goes along the ways of implementing how to create a better well-being for the person who's coming in as a customer. And then offering help to problem gamers, also be talked about in the next slide. It's just how to help people who have gone too far past the point of just playing for fun. So one of the ways is displaying on-screen messages, and one of the sources I found was talking about how if it's an on-screen message placed while they're playing, it has more of an impact on them. And then second is advertising with user safety in mind. So this kind of goes along the same way as a drinking company would say like drink responsibly in the end of their ad. It might say game responsibly or something along the lines of that, maybe quantifying the actual like winning chances. And then helping problem gamers. There's a couple ways you can do that. One of them is going to be maybe like offering helplines or like how they advertise, maybe put a percentage of that going towards helping problem gamers, like putting helplines in an advertisement or something along that line.
Okay, so regulations and how they affect the industry. When I was researching this, I thought it was very interesting because I've never actually known anything about regulations with casinos and what it takes with them. So first, we have regulations on casinos and other establishments are enforced and controlled by the GCB, which is the Gambling Control Board. For every company, it's important to have some type of upper level management to make sure that the smaller businesses and franchises are holding will to what they're doing. That's really important for regulations also because if there's no control over what you're doing, I mean, you can basically, charge people, like 10 times more than what you should be, or just doing some illegal activities. Secondly, the GCP supervises and help maintain the integrity of laws and regulations put in place of the industry. So to reiterate, like I said, they're here to make sure that everything goes as planned and that the customers are treated fairly. Without the strategic structure of the GCP, many establishments would not only be involved in unjust acts, they would also face the possibility of creating a fragile organizational downfall. So with that being said, if companies do not comply with the laws, they could be bankrupt, they could face like a lot of jail time, they could really tarnish their brand. Related gambling regulations amongst the U.S. and other countries. This was also interesting because not only in the U.S., but there has been other laws in place that basically keep everybody in mind. Because with humans, even though we're from different areas of the world, we still have the same tendency to do similar actions. So especially with like online activities, it's not illegal everywhere, but there are some places where people use unsolicited websites and the black market also, and most recently, video games. Also, we have acts from the UK, which were signed in 2005, in France 2010, in Germany 2012, and other countries as well. So we see the correlation between the U.S. and other countries. So there's gambling is like a universal tool. So it's like a psychological mindset from people from all across the world. So like I said, it's pretty much human nature to do that.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the information given and our connection to our theory. So first off, we want to create awareness of the emotional and financial risks that come along with gambling. That's going to be the first step in attempting to diminish these effects. And then we establish who the most vulnerable target is to guide with advertising. And then we're going to reshape the risk factors. So the plan is to target the youth to do so. And the most effective way to target the youth would be in schools. So the prevention program will be introduced to kids aging from 14 to 19 years old. And this theory has been tested by Drs. Robert Williams and Robert Woods. The problem gambling prevention program that they have is called Stacked Deck. And their study included 10 schools which received the program and four schools who did not. Both were asked to complete the survey at the end, and the results showed that the students that did have the training, they had more negative attitudes toward gambling, and they had increased knowledge toward gambling in comparison to the students who did not get the training. So I found if at least half of the schools in the country had the luxury to offer this type of effective training, the results prove there is potential to promote a healthier lifestyle. Then we're going to make the connection between gambling and the economy. So when analyzing the effect gambling has on the economy, it is clear that the community who houses the casinos would benefit from the money spent recreationally. But from an individual standpoint, most of the money spent by locals virtually has no economic benefit for themselves because the money is just being moved within a community. So imagine if in the same community the casino did not exist, that same individual would seek to spend the money differently towards another source of satisfaction that would result in a more prosperous outcome emotionally and economically. So with these facts proved, the risks and effects of gambling can be reduced by guidance and advertising because people will respond more intelligently when they are forewarned of the consequences. And we're going to close with this video right here.
if you push the escape button, it'll take you back, and then you can go down. It's probably turned off on the main. There you go. Yeah.
Let's go. Don't want to be late. Oh, hey, so your aunt's picking you up from school today.
Again? Why?
Mommy's gotta go and try to win back your college tuition at the slots.
Slots?
Yeah, the slots.
Mom,
I know, and it could take a while.
can't Daddy pick me up?
No, remember, this is our secret. Daddy can't know.
Okay, Mom.
Okay, good. Let's go. Don't want to be late.
Okay, so you said that ages 11 through 16 gamble in the UK. How do they how are these younger voters interact like regulations? So they walk through the doors, just go gamble, and they're 11 years old. Or how do
They use scratch offs. They're legal until the age of 16.
oh, they are. Okay.
And then it said something else about like just in school, like gambling stuff. I guess it's pretty hard over there in the UK compared to the US.
And they can get together and play like card games too, individually, and use their own money as a pool themselves.
And I say with onlining being legal in the UK, kids just have access to the internet so they can easily engage in it.
So is there regulation for age on online gambling there? 18 or 21? Or is it? Do you have to like check? Yeah, I'm 18 plus or whatever.
Yeah, you just check it, you just say you're 18, and it's all word of mouth.
It's sort of like the liquor sites that ask you for your birth date. I mean, everybody knows that you can lie on your birth date, right? And figure out what 21 is. Just put that in. So, who has the world's largest casino? Oklahoma. Which state has the most casinos? Oklahoma. We have more casinos than Nevada and Oklahoma, and we have more earthquakes than California. So there you go. What do you the World Health Organization says, and this goes along with addiction, that there is no safe amount of alcohol anymore. You know, they used to say things like, I mean, this is the way medicine, this is the reason medicine's not a real science. Because I remember when I was growing up, they'd say, oh, a glass of wine is good for your heart. A glass of red wine every night is, the World Health Organization has now said there is no safe amount of alcohol. It's like cigarette smoking. There is no safe amount of cigarette smoking. One cigarette can change your DNA. I mean, it's just not safe. Is there any safe amount of gambling?
I don't think so, because there is still a potential to create a lot of anxiety and stress even after that one time. Because just like cigarettes, gambling is really addictive as well.
Yeah.
Keep you coming back for more.
And this is one of the areas in marketing that is highly, unlike medicine, highly scientific. Casinos are designed to separate you from your money. I mean, in everything they do. Well, what does that mean? They keep the temperature at exactly a certain point to keep you not too hot, not too cold, the color of the carpeting, the way the slots sound. They even, if you go in and play slots in Oklahoma, it used to be in the good old days, you'd put your quarter or your nickel or your penny in slots, and then they would actually shoot out pennies or quarters or nickels. They don't do that anymore. They shoot out a ticket. What does it say? Cash out winnings. Well, there's something called a negative win on gambling, what is that? So let's say you're playing penny slots. It's got 35 lines and you win 5 cents, but it costs you 30 cents to play 30, a penny a line. That's a negative win. But you think, the idea is you're winning. You saw, it says, wins on the screen, but it's not, right? I mean, you've lost what? 25 cents. And so it's really, the way the devices are designed, the design of the casino itself, the lighting, the temperature. What don't you see in casinos? I mean, this is you don't see clocks and you don't see windows. Why is that?
They don't want you to know the time.
They don't want you to know what time it is or how long you've been there. Yeah. And it's enormously scientific in terms of the ability to do that. Do you think that advertising, so you talked about the studies that show that targeting youth has increased their knowledge, and it may have an impact on them. Cigarette ads people say when they watch these ads, the anti-smoking ads, that they're horrified and they don't want to smoke. But if we put them in fMRI machines, particularly smokers, and we show them the ads, the part of the brain that is triggered by the ad is actually the pleasure center of the brain, and they start jonesing for a cigarette. Even the most horrible of the cigarette ads, the ones that talk about, my advice if you're going to smoke, and the woman is having to put on her hair and clean out her tracheotomy. It makes people want to smoke. One of the things that is interesting from a regulatory standpoint is, can you actually regulate it? In 1973, in a case called Miller versus California, the United States Supreme Court attempted to define pornography. And they defined it as being something that appealed to the prurient interest, was patently offensive, displayed a sexual act, and was utterly without redeeming social value, which they defined as the SLAPS test. It meant that the work taken as a whole lacked serious literary, artistic, political, or social value. So what, under that definition, always passed the SLAPS test? Well, Playboy magazine always passed the SLAPS test because the work taken as a whole, and Playboy had articles. They had contributors that won Pulitzers for their articles in that magazine. Miller is still good law, but how do you enforce it in an age of the internet? The United States Supreme Court has never overruled Miller. They still say that Miller is good law and allows for the idea that maybe there are different community standards throughout this nation. For example, in Oklahoma, we have very strict pornography laws that don't allow for the sale or distribution of these things. But how do you stop it when everybody's got one of these and you can't control what somebody is broadcasting on this device, on the internet from the Netherlands, can you? And online gambling is the same way. How do you really regulate it when you can have people that are out there in other countries that don't regulate this, putting this stuff out?
I think the only really way would be censorship, and that's almost considered unethical because everybody really they should have the freedom to search whatever they want.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that comes to mind in regards to online.
Okay, but how do you, let's say we pass laws that said you can't do this, you can't have online gambling. How do you stop it? One of the things that happens, for example, in China, you can't get the same kind of internet access, in theory, that you can get in the United States because they have filters. But just as soon as you put up a filter, people figure out what? How to get around the filter. they figure out, I mean, people are pretty ingenious in figuring this, how to get around that filter to get the content that you want. It's really hard. www stands for World Wide Web. And it's hard to regulate what somebody, in, I don't know, Great Britain or Italy or someplace else is putting up. All right, good job. You guys have a great weekend. I will see you on Tuesday for another round of group projects.